George R. R. Martin wants a movie to wrap up the end of Game of Thrones? Hey, it's Katie, and a few days ago George R. R. Martin said in an interview that he would like for the end of Game of Thrones to be wrapped up in a $100 million movie. 2-hour movie, $100 million, wrap up all of Game of Thrones. Of course he said, you know, I don't know how many seasons there are going to be. Are there going to be 6, 7, 10? Who knows? But the dragons get bigger and the scope of the story gets ginormous. So he's saying that he'll need a $100 million movie to wrap up the end of Game of Thrones. This is crazy. First of all, I don't think you could even wrap up the entire show in one movie. I mean, we don't know how many seasons of the show there's going to be, so it's really kind of impossible to tell, but I think, just by reading the books, each book could be a trilogy. Literally a trilogy. Every single book. So I don't know if they're going to be able to put any sort of Game of Thrones into a movie. Only 2 hours? I mean, they would be taking a show that is 10 episodes, an hour, and sometimes a little bit more than an hour long, and putting it in a 2-hour movie. That's insane. Even on the show, they have a hard time getting everything in there because there's just so much detail. How are they gonna put it into one movie? Now, I know this is George R. R. Martin just being like, oh, I'd love to see, you know, everything in the scope that I envisioned, and a $100 million movie I'm sure would be beautiful, and trust me, if it happened, I'd be all for it. I just really think that Game of Thrones works as a TV show because then we get 10 hours of a season and not just a 2-hour movie. I mean, could you imagine if Game of Thrones was a trilogy? You would literally have to do it like Harry Potter, and even then you can't do one movie per book for Game of Thrones. There's just no way. You cannot fit all the information in. You couldn't even summarize the book and throw it in a 2-hour movie. I mean, there's just so much that goes on in the books that they would have to cut out, I would think, just to be able to fit everything in, but maybe they'll do a trilogy, and hopefully Game of Thrones keeps going and going and going so that we can get the wrap-up, or we can get his entire idea out there in a TV show form. I would not be opposed to a movie. And with HBO making an Entourage movie, you know, they're all about making movies now out of their shows and wrapping things up better. It's just crazy to think that we could get 7 seasons of Game of Thrones and then a huge movie. Obviously, he hasn't finished his last 2 books, but just knowing him and how he writes and how these books have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, I mean, A Dance with Dragons is gigantic. So the 6th one and the 7th one have to be just as big or bigger. How can you fit it in? Even if they do manage to get all of the books into the show, there still could be a movie, and maybe that's what he's talking about. Maybe he's like, oh, we'll do 10 seasons of the show, we'll wrap it up, but then we'll have a big finale movie to put it all together, which could be really, really cool, especially because the dragons are gonna get so big, and I'm sure there's gonna be crazy, enormous, epic battles happening. I can only imagine, and so, yeah, maybe a movie would work in that sense, but I definitely don't think you could just cancel the show right now. Like, if the show were to get canceled, which it's not, so don't panic, if it were to get canceled tomorrow, could they put the rest of them into a movie? No, you can't. You cannot put it into one movie. There'd have to be 10 movies, and I'm okay with that, and I'd be at all 10 of them, and it'd be awesome. But I love Game of Thrones so much, throw it at me in any form, and I'm gonna watch it. But I want to hear from you. What do you think of them wrapping up the entire Game of Thrones show in a $100 million movie? Do you think that'd be really awesome? Would you prefer them to wrap it up on the show? Because I just don't know yet. It depends how far they get in the show, for me, I think. Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.